Welcome back. We're doing October-November 2022 question paper 11. So again, I'm just going to take out or exclude question. There's a question on the Marshall learner condition, which is A level now. So we can take that out. And we will start from question 30. Okay, which combination of changes is most likely to result in a fall in a country's inflation rate? Right, what are we looking at here? Exchange rate, interest rate, money supply. So we're looking at basically what is going to be contractionary monetary policies. Okay, designed to move AD to the left, designed to decrease inflation. Contractionary monetary policies are a higher exchange rate because price of exports go up, total exports go down, price of imports go down, total imports go up, X minus M will therefore decrease. Interest rate higher, which restricts consumer expenditure and investment, and the money supply lower, which affects consumer expenditure as well. Okay, so that would be the contractionary monetary policy. Just for reference, D would be expansionary monetary policy, which might increase a country's inflation rate. 29. Raising interest rates is proposed to reduce a balance of payment deficit. Which justification for this action is not valid? Okay, it will attract more foreign currency inflows. That is true. It will encourage exporters to find new foreign markets. That is true, or could be true. It will lower the level of imported consumer goods. Again, that might be true. It will put downward pressure on the exchange rate. That is not true. It will put upward pressure on the exchange rate. So the justification for the action that's not valid would be D. We cover this in the current account balance of payments chapter. Raising the interest rates can result in an appreciation of the currency, which is upward pressure. Downward pressure is a depreciation of the currency. Remember that if you raise interest rates, follow the chain of analysis through. Raising the interest rates results in an increased demand for the currency from foreign markets. Just like we said above, it will attract more foreign currency inflows. Demand on the foreign exchange market will shift to the right for our currency and will have an appreciation against other currencies. 28. To encourage people to work, a government increases the minimum income level at which people start to pay income tax. Okay. What type of macroeconomic policies are being followed? So first of all, remember taxes and government spending are both the tools of fiscal policy. So we're told here that they're doing it to encourage people to work. And we should know by now that some elements of fiscal policy, like the use of taxes, can also be supply-side policies depending on their aims. So it's definitely not a monetary policy. Correct answer here would be A. Fiscal is the use of taxes, and supply-side is the encouragement of people to work. We're trying to disincentivize them to stay at home and collect government benefits, and we're trying to incentivize them by increasing the level at which they can earn an income before they pay tax to go and to work. Question 26. What is likely to explain an increase in the deficit on a country's current account in the balance of payments? Okay, so an increase in the deficit, what we're looking for is more imports versus exports in simple terms. Although it doesn't look like here that's the case. So remember our four components, right? Just to reference, because we always do it in this way. Could be more imports less exports, which would increase a deficit, right? Or it could be, which it is in this case, because we can see the answer here, I'll give you in 1 minute, could be one of those four components, which is the trade, balance of goods and trade, balance of goods and services, primary income, or secondary income. So essentially, any of the items which are referenced as debits, in other words, money outflows, will increase the deficit. So in this case, an increase in government foreign aid to countries abroad, that will result in an increase in the deficit on the secondary income, okay, because that's where foreign aid is included, and therefore that will also increase the deficit on the total of the current account. Okay, all of the others will not affect it. The amount of money we save doesn't affect it. An increase in other countries' exchange rates, or an increase in government tax rates, no. Okay, so in this case we were looking for an element that affected one of the four components. Okay, 25. What is likely to cause an increase? So what is actually going to cause an appreciation of the currency? Okay, so first of all, what we need to think about is, first of all, for B is not going to have any effect, okay, increase in national income. Now, when it comes to A, C, and D, so the correct answer would be D, discovery of a natural resource that replaces imports. And the reason for that is because if we have no need for imports, right, what it will do is it will create, or it should, a trade surplus, right? That trade surplus will result in a higher demand for our currency, as people need to obtain our currency in order to pay for our exports. And that will result in an appreciation of our currency, okay? This question is relating back to trade, essentially. And really it's very simple. If the exports go higher, it could result in an appreciation of the currency, because if our exports go higher, it means that there's more demand for our currency. If our imports go higher, i.e. if we have a trade deficit, what that does is essentially it results in us having to sell more of our currency, which actually depreciates the currency. So for example, if we look at A and C, right, both A and C are going to have AD moving to the right, okay, and both of them, increase in money supply or demand pull inflation, they're both possibly going to be inflationary, right? Increasing money supply can also be hard to control the inflation rate. So if we create a little chain of analysis for this, higher inflation, right, and again, relate it or break it down in terms of trade, that will make exports less competitive, and it will make imports more competitive. So we would expect to have more imports and less exports, okay? In other words, we would have a trade deficit, which would increase, or we would increase the supply of yuan on the foreign exchange market, which would result in a depreciation of the yuan, right? In order for us to have an appreciation, we would need to have lower inflation, right? Low inflation, because what that would do, that would make our exports more competitive, our imports less competitive, trade surplus, increased demand for the currency, and an appreciation, right? Okay, so that is that one. 24, very straightforward. What is a measure of a country's terms of trade? That's A. Price index of exports, price index of imports. It is not total value. Okay, and it is exports above imports, right? Just a simple definition question. 23. Table shows information from the current account of the balance of payments for Canada and Singapore. What can be concluded from the table? Canada exported more goods than Singapore. We can't conclude that, because we're told the value, we're not told the amount that they've actually exported. Cheaper, we also can't conclude that. Again, we're told the amount, we're told the value, not the actual price. So then we need to calculate B and C. Canada and Singapore had current account deficits. So let's calculate for Canada first. We need to calculate balance of trade first, which is the exports minus the imports. 462,105. That is going to be minus 13,745. Their services next, which would be 100,350 minus 115,270 minus 14,920. Minus, so that will definitely be a deficit. For Singapore, if we do a quick calculation, I'll just do approximate amounts here. I don't want to have to spend the time to calculate it all. So let's say approximately 108 positive. Approximately for their services, 85 positive. And we can see that they will actually, or Singapore will actually have a surplus, right? So B will have to be incorrect. Singapore had a surplus on its trade in goods and services. Yeah, that is true, because even from the approximate amounts we're looking at here, their total surplus on the trade in goods and services would be around 200k, right? 108 plus 85 approximately. So definitely into the surplus. Okay, question 22. Diagram shows initial equilibrium positions at Y1, P1. Which diagram reflects the impact on an economy of higher unit wage costs? So higher unit wage costs will move aggregate supply to the left because it will increase the cost of production. And an improvement in the balance of trade. So if there's an improvement in the balance of trade, then our exports will rise, and we can expect that AD should move to the right. Okay, once we identify that, very simple. We're looking for the diagram where AD moves right and where AS moves left, and I can see right here that that should be B. Okay. Okay, also very simple. Looks like a complicated diagram, but it's not, because it never really changes, this diagram, with the effect on the domestic industries for tariffs and on the values. So diagram shows the demand and supply curves for solar panels in the US. 2018 they put a tariff. What is the quantity of imported solar panels after the imposition of the tariff? Okay, very simple. What is the quantity of the imported solar panels after the tariff? You go to the line, it looks like a maximum price, and the quantity is here to here, which is NP. Okay, really very straightforward. Just literally reading the diagram will give you the answer. Okay, because that is the amount for imports that are now being provided after the tariff, whereas previously it used to be M or, which was the world supply. Okay, difficult question 20. Assume the Chinese monetary authorities are committed to maintaining an exchange rate of China's currency between P1 and P2. Okay, so they want to maintain the exchange rate between here. What might they do if supply changed from S1 to S2? Okay, so the exchange rate is now depreciated outside of where they want to maintain it. So what they need to do is they need to get it back into P1, P2, that area. So if they introduce controls on Chinese investment overseas, that will, because that's going to restrict the supply. So we might have less yuan sold on the market as the demand for US dollars will decrease. Therefore, because Chinese companies will be restricted in terms of being able to go to America and invest, there'll be less yuan exchanged for dollars. Supply level of the yuan will decrease, and we will hopefully get back into that P1, P2 range. If we have lower interest rates, that will actually decrease the demand for the yuan. So you would have a shift to the left in the demand curve, which would just further depreciate the currency. If you remove tariffs on imports from the United States, same thing as the question provided down below, that will create a trade deficit, or it will reduce a trade surplus. But essentially it means that the supply of yuan will have to be increased to pay for the imports. So that would actually just further shift our supply to the right and further bring us away from the exchange rate that we're trying to maintain in between P1 and P2. And D is the exact same. Selling yuan on the foreign exchange markets, supply would increase, shift right, and further move away from the maintained exchange rate target that we have. Okay, 19. Assuming the demand for oil is price inelastic, what will be the effect on demand pull inflation and on cost push inflation in an oil importing country of an increase in the world price of oil? Right, so effect on demand pull and effect on cost push. If we're an oil importing country and the price of oil increases, right, then very simply what is going to happen is that that will increase our cost of production, because we're still going to have to import oil in order to make goods and services. It will shift our aggregate supply curve to the left, and it will create, or it will increase cost push inflation. Okay. Now what it will also do is it will also decrease demand pull inflation, because if you think about it in very simple terms, if it's now more expensive to import raw materials that we need to make goods and services, then what it's going to do is it's going to reduce the availability of those goods and services in our own country, which should theoretically reduce the consumption of those goods and services in our country. And we know that consumption is the main component of aggregate demand, which would mean that aggregate demand will either contract or it will shift to the left, right? But either way, it is not going to increase demand pull inflation, because under those circumstances, the most likely effect is that AD will move left or contract. A government announces its intention to reduce the level of transfer payments in the economy. Which statement made by the government is consistent with this intention? Okay, very simple. There needs to be more incentives for unemployed workers to seek jobs. Correct. State pensions need to be increased. That's not consistent with reducing transfer payments. Level of income tax needs to be raised. Again, that is not consistent with reducing levels of transfer payments. And level of government expenditure needs to be increased. Again, not consistent with reducing transfer payments. All of those would be consistent with increasing transfer payments. But providing incentives for people to seek jobs would be consistent with reducing the payments that we make for unemployment benefits, for example. Concert has a fixed capacity, allows it to sell 10,000 tickets for a concert. Equilibrium price for a ticket is $10. The owners of the arena decide to set a minimum price for a ticket. Under which conditions will there be the most unsold tickets? Okay, so it's definitely not going to be when it's inelastic, because we know that the demand is not going to change by that much. When it is, so the most unsold tickets, when it is elastic, the higher the price is. So price here in this case when it's 12 versus when it's 11. If it's elastic, we know that the demand for the tickets is going to reduce by more than the increase in price. So the price here will increase by 10%, which means that the demand here would have to decrease by more than 10%. But if the price for D increases by 20%, then the demand for the concert tickets will have to decrease by more than 20%, which means that we will at least have 2001 tickets unsold. So it would have to be D. 16, difficult question this one. Kind of tried to trick you out a little bit here. Government has decided to guarantee manufacturers a price OPA for a product and, importantly, to provide a subsidy to ensure that the market clears. So if they're providing OPA, what they're doing is they're essentially saying that we are going to guarantee this level here at W, right? Now, in order to ensure that the market clears, we would have to make sure that at the price they guarantee that there's an intersection with demand, right? Because in order to do that, otherwise there would be either excess supply or excess demand, etc. So essentially, it's going to look like this, right? If we're just for the purposes of showing the level of the subsidy. So therefore, if they're going to provide it OPA, then the level of the subsidy provided, you know that when you do your subsidy, it's from the shift in the new supply curve up to where it hits the original. And if you do that, you can see that the total area of the subsidy, because of the guarantee that they've made, would be PA, PB, Y, W. That would be PA, Y, W, PB, B. Okay, 15. Diagram shows the percentages of those on low pay and those on extremely low pay in a country from 1976 to 2012. National minimum wage was introduced in 1999. Which conclusion is consistent with the diagram? Minimum wage helped the low paid more than the extremely low paid. Definitely not true. You can see here that the extremely low paid, the percentage of them, remember it's percentage represented here, has actually significantly decreased. So it's the opposite way around. Reduce the numbers of both low paid and extremely low paid. We can't conclude that from the diagram. We're only told the percentages of people. We're not told the actual amount. Minimum wage reversed the trend in low pay. Okay. Yeah, so that'd be true, because we can see here the trend was increasing for both extremely low paid and for just normal low paid. The trend leveled out after the introduction of the minimum wage, and it actually decreased as a percentage of the people who were extremely low paid after the introduction of it in 1999. Therefore, D has to be incorrect. Minimum wage was responsible for the largest reduction of low pay in the period. Okay, so that cannot also be concluded from the diagram. Question 14, another question that comes up all the time. Mixed economies, what explains why the provision of certain goods and services will remain under government control? That will be because of public goods. Market system fails to provide public goods, therefore government have to step in and provide those goods that are non-excludable and are non-rivalrous in order to ensure that people can have access for them and for the benefit of society. Right? Everything else, not relevant. Why in mixed economies do some goods and services under government control? The answer will always be public goods. Absolutely no other possibility. It's the only question they ask relating to that. 13. This is a difficult question as well, actually. There's a couple of very difficult questions in this exam, I thought. Diagram shows the market for electric steel-plated switches used in new houses. What could not have caused the market equilibrium position to have changed from X to Y? Okay, so the first thing to remember here is the market for electric steel-plated switches essentially is dictated by the market for new houses. In other words, what I mean is, if there's an increase in demand for new houses, or if any of these options increase the demand for new houses, then by definition there will be an increase in the demand for electric steel-plated switches. Okay? Electric steel-plated switches are not going to be demanded more unless there is new houses demanded more, because that is where they are being used. And that's what we're told. These are the markets for the ones that are used in new houses. What would not cause the market equilibrium position to have changed? So increasing the availability of loan for buying houses, that would, because it would increase the demand for houses, and therefore by definition it would increase the demand for switches, which we could see, shift from D1 to D2 and a movement from X to Y. Granting a subsidy for producers of bricks, that also would, because what that would do is it would lower the cost of production, and if it lowers the cost of production it would therefore increase the demand for houses, which would again by definition increase the demand for switches. D would also do the same thing, because for D it would lower the construction costs, and therefore again by definition it would increase the demand for housing, and therefore by definition increase the demand for electric steel plated switches. Whereas if we remove sales tax on electric switches, what that will do is, okay, so it will lower the price because it will shift the supply curve to the right for electric switches. However, it will not directly affect the demand for housing. Just because electric switches are cheaper doesn't mean you're going to want to build more houses because of that. It is a very small component of all of the costs that are involved in building a house. So all of the other ones that will directly impact on the cost of production or on the demand for buying or using new houses will have an impact on electric steel plated switches. C will not, because it would not result in that significant of a shift in demand. Okay, and it would not result in any change in demand really, even though it will lower their price. We're depending on new houses to be demanded in order for switches to be demanded. Okay, I thought that one was quite tricky. Question 12. When is the supply curve for a car manufacturing firm most likely to be price elastic? Okay, if they find it difficult to recruit new labour, inelastic, can't make as much. Large quantity of stock, yeah, so their ability to store. Firm operating in short run, inelastic in short run, elastic in long run. Firm operating near to full capacity, inelastic. Okay, just recap on your determinants of PES, very simple question. Diagram shows the impact of a fall in the price of oil that will lead to a fall in energy costs for many manufacturers. What will be the impact of this change on the consumer and the producer surplus? Okay, so initially we start here. So initially JL is our consumer surplus, right? If we have a change in the price, a decrease in the price, we can see that this area in here is our gain of consumer surplus, so our consumer surplus will get bigger. Okay? Now before, this might get hard with the different colours, our producer surplus would have been this area in orange. Okay, and when we shift, so if I can actually just shade that in a little bit, we can see how small that area is. When the supply curve shifts to the right, producer surplus, remember, is the area to the bottom of the supply curve underneath equilibrium price. We can see that the area of the green triangle is much bigger than the area of the orange triangle. Our producer surplus has also risen. Okay, so one of these questions where demand and supply are both shifting. Pineapple producers benefit from improved technology. Supply curve will shift right. Same time, a new diet book suggests eating pineapples helps with weight loss. Demand will shift right, and we will be left at C. Okay, very easy. What does not cause a shift in the supply curve of cars? Okay, change in the car producer's cost of production, that does cause a shift. Change in the price of fuel used by car owners. Okay, that would be the correct answer. It's used by the car owners. Remember, shift in the supply curve of cars would have to be by something that will affect the producers. And the producer's cost of production will definitely affect them. The sales tax that's on cars will definitely affect them. And the workers is also part of their cost of production, their wage rates, and that will definitely affect them too. Which products are likely to have a positive cross-elasticity demand? So remember, positive cross-elasticity demand means that they're substitutes. So this should be very straightforward if you understand that. What is a substitute with tea? Coffee and hot chocolate, because they're the other types of drinks. Price elasticity of supply. Just tell you correct answer here. It's very simple. It's just a definition question. And that is B. Measure of quantity supplied of a good, how it responds to a change in price. Ceteris paribus, what is not assumed to remain constant when drawing this curve? We explained this in the other 2022 paper. I think it was in the May-June section. Ceteris paribus is normally drawn assuming that the price changes, but that all of the other factors remain constant. Okay, as soon as you've seen what is not assumed to remain constant, essentially what they're asking you there is, like, what is ceteris paribus? We draw a demand curve or a supply curve. We draw a demand curve or supply curve on the basis that the price of the product can change, but that the factors which will affect the shifts in it, for example, will remain constant at the time of drawing. When will the demand curve for motorcycles shift to the left? Okay, start at the bottom. Price of public transport rises. Okay, so price of public transport rises, demand for public transport reduces, and demand for motorcycles goes right. So that's wrong. We want shift to the left. Tax on a motorcycle rises. That will affect supply. Supply will go left. Price of motorcycles fall. Okay, no. Okay, that's an extension contraction. Remember, we're looking for a shift. Price of car falls. That will. Cars are substitutes. So if the price of cars go down, the demand for cars will shift to the right. And therefore, because motorcycles are a substitute, the demand for motorcycles will shift to the left. Question 4. A doctor has very long working hours and a high level of stress. She can become a teacher instead of continuing as a doctor. What is the opportunity cost of choosing to continue as a doctor? Okay. Mistakes caused by tiredness, possible costs of illness caused by high levels of stress. They're not the opportunity cost. Remember, the opportunity cost has to be relating to what she has given up. And what she has given up is the potential salary that she could have earned as a teacher. Question 3. Food prices in a country increased by 20% in 3 months due to an infectious virus. Which statement about the cause of this rise in food prices is normative? Remember, normative is it's the economic statements that are based on opinions or are subjective. They cannot be tested. So C and D we can see straight away. They're positive statements. Was reduced. Transport costs increased by 10%. Farm workers demanded higher wages to cover extra hours. So that's something that could be tested, right? So we'll assume that that's going to be a positive statement as well. We could actually test if they got higher wages or demanded higher wages. But to say that consumers were scared of running out of food, that would definitely be the most normative statement out of all of these. Question 2. A local council provides a tap for drinking water in a town. Would this make drinking water a free good? Okay, remember, a free good means that there's no resources that are needed to produce it. The local council provides it, then resources have been needed. So that will be no, because it requires the use of scarce resources. There would be no human intervention as such if it was a free good. It would just exist and be available for consumption, like oxygen. But drinking water is definitely not a free good. An economy is changing from plan to market. What would be expected? Replacement of fiscal policy by monetary policy? No. Okay, wouldn't make a difference really. Depends on their aims. Replacement of multinational by national? No. That would be the case if we were going from market to planned. Nationalisation by privatisation? That would be expected. Nationalisation is associated with planned economy, and privatisation, private companies, with the market economy. And replacement of private property rights by common ownership, again, that would be the same as B if you were going from a market economy to a planned economy instead. Okay, and that's it for this paper.